But here, this is November 24th, 1933. General opinion seems that President Roosevelt is facing a crisis on the monetary question, or will soon have to either, to the left, use the money printing press, or to the right, stabilize and return to the gold standard. So obviously the money collapsed at that point, where they had to make a transition in the economy the way things were done. So see, they're moving to the printing press. Modern monetary theory, the same equivalent today would be moving over to blockchain and digital technologies and cryptocurrencies versus returning to a gold standard. Because the gold standard is always going to be there. It's been sound money for what, 8,000 years plus, or I mean, as long as, even further back. You go back in archaeological finds of the Denisovans, even back 80,000 years ago, and they still got gold in there as like, you know, making it into something wearable. I want to talk about the 1930s similarities to what could be happening from this point forward. And if it does with the economic downturn and collapse at that point, then what happens? And what are the similarities of the 1930s Great Depression with what might be coming here shortly with food pricing? And it looks like unavailability of natural gas and heating and all these types of electricity into Europe. So something definitely is going to break, at least in Europe, and that once it does there, it affects the rest of the planet. In the 1930s, Great Depression, a diary, Benjamin Roth, the author. And the reason I want to read this part about pensions from the 1930s, this date is April 30th, 1932. The pensions were lost, and as we do today, the IRAs will be lost, and these sort of things will be taken away. Social Security, if the government defaults or, collapses on itself, you see that they never got their pensions. So how many people got pensions from Weimar Germany, from the Weimar Republic when it collapsed? It didn't. How many people are getting their pension plan in Zimbabwe? They aren't. You see, whenever a nation or a currency collapses, it affects the people there. You lose everything. You don't get anything back because the currency collapsed. It's not like after they bring a new currency, I'm like, hey, we owed you this pension. Here it is, with interest from all those years that we missed on it, and here it is in the brand new money again. You'd be very lucky if you were to live through that point, see the collapse, come back out, and still get that pension. Very, very unlikely. So what did it say? The editor's note here, the journal entry, it talks about finance, just like we got all these earnings numbers out today. But here's where the interesting overlay comes. So it says no change for the better, and this is April 30th, 1932. First quarter shows that sheet and tubing lost $3 million. But I mean, back then, that was like billions now. Hundreds of millions. $3 million, if a company loses $3 million, that doesn't make the news anymore. But these are the news headlines that were there at the time. Republic Steel lost $2 million. U.S. Steel lost $12 million at the time. And then steel dropped. And then it dropped the dividends from the stocks. And they said it collapsed down to 27. Now, I don't see a 0.27 or $27. Oh, and Western Union sells at 24. Must be dollars. But at that time, see, they stopped paying the dividend off of their stock. Jamie Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan, warning economic hurricane. The worst is yet to come for Americans. Larry Summers forecast recession ahead, millions of layoffs, big tech companies like Tesla slashing 10% of the workforce, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs warning market another 20% to fall, recession, Bloomberg Intelligence forecasting $2,500 gold by the end of the year. Wells Fargo sees gold hitting record highs in 2022. Long-term forecast, gold above 5,000. That's an economic collapse. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Call 1-800-356-4470 for a free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated IRA gold dealer from 2016 to present, click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video. But I like to see the correlation between the different indices and what the stocks are doing, because it'll show you on the ground where the fertilizer shortages are and where the other things along that chain of food, fertilizer, and energy. You can watch the greater stock markets and see, like, are they having a problem now or not? Because it just backs up that, yes, there's a problem, but if they're making more money, you can see that the prices of that have gone up to a point where then it'll hit demand destruction. But right now they're making mad money because they're charging 50% more for everything. But if it were to collapse and there was a stock there and you did have a dividend on it coming in, see, a lot of people do that. They invest just on these dividend stocks. So the investment goes in and they rely on that money coming out for a dividend. But when they stop doing that, that's a huge shift in the market. And then it says, with most people, it has come to daily effort to get food. It's almost funny today to see how quickly people are willing to plead poverty and brag about how much they lost because then they can get food from the soup line or the government. So here was the editor's note on this. It's interesting about the World War in 1924. It says in 1924, the war veterans of World War I were rewarded with a pension or a bonus. It was about $1,000 for their service to be delivered in 1945. But at the beginning of the late 20s, the war veterans who had to become a major national political force began demanding that the government pay the bonus immediately. Then in May 1932, a few veterans in Portland, Oregon, led by Sergeant Walter Walters, had enough joblessness and endured enough poverty for 18 months, decided to march on Washington and demanded an early distribution of their bonuses because the Depression had gotten things so bad. I want the money back right now in the pension because it's going to collapse, not going to be there. So knowing that's considered fraud. So they're all demanding their money. They were very smart in the 1930s, were they not? It's an investment product. You can't remove your money. So they said in China to all those people who they stole their money from in Bank of China. It's an investment product of the bank. The bail-in, that's our new law here in America. Marched on Washington and said, I demand early distribution of that bonus, that $1,000 that you promised me after I got my butt shot off in World War I in a trench and mustard gassed. I want my money. They dubbed themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force, a reference to the American Expeditionary Force dispatched to Europe during World War I. So they were in Portland. They jumped on the boxcars and began their trek to Washington, all the way from Washington to Washington. The voyage was mostly peaceful and orderly, but in East St. Louis, they got kicked off the train and the National Guard came in to break them up and get them off the train. And that excursion didn't just become front page news, but a national movement. They called them the Bonus Army. So the people who are like, yeah, we fought in the war, we won our thing, the Depression, we need our money now. The Bonus Army, that's kind of a cool name to call yourselves, right? More and more out-of-work veterans from around the country joined the march. Roth would see a group of veterans in Youngstown, that's in Ohio, in June. And by the time Waters and his crew watched and reached Washington, 1,000 vets dressed in their old, tattered Army attire had descended on the Capitol. So you had 1,000 World War I veterans wearing their uniforms or clothing from battle, all tattered. And then eventually it swelled to 20,000. And the incident ended in violence. Well, of course it would. That's a legitimate request. You got former service members saying you promised us these bonds. Well, give it up now because we're all starving. Or we're all out of work. Or we're all something. Stocks obviously collapsed to the point where they couldn't pay a dividend. That's huge. I mean, if that were to happen today, that would shut down the stock market. And you could see how things shifted on just the government side of the inability to pay and the non-willingness to listen to grievances. And you know it's going to the same things happening again because every chapter of history, you have the right to protest, blah, blah, blah. But as soon as you do that right and you get enough people together and you go to the place that you want to talk to people, they put the army out on you or the police. So, you look at it, right to protest, but there is none really. The enforcers will always be there if your numbers get large enough, always. So they even brought the National Guard out to kick the guys off the train. I mean, the conductors or whatever couldn't walk back with their lanterns and go, dudes, you got to get off the train. We're going to decouple these cars. I don't want any guys to get hurt. We're going to move the cars apart, but we need them for another route. So you got your train stops here. You guys got halfway across the country. I wish I could get you the rest of the way. And maybe if there's a train heading that way in the next 12 or, 24 or 48 hours, we'll get you on there. We'll attach a couple extra cars empty or something. That's a wholly different way to do it than having National Guard to pull the guys off the train. That's the 1930s. So it's going to end up something very similar. You see how the flash mobs in the supermarkets, so they're going to station troops and police in the supermarkets. All right, that's a given already. You can see how it's moving that direction. And I'm just going to fast forward in the book here to an image where I see them dumping out milk. Angry dairy farmers who were unable to feed their families or pay their real estate taxes or mortgages on the 1 cent that they had received for their milk. So the government came in and said, we will buy your milk for 1 quart a cent. They went on strike and said, you know what? We're not going to sell you the milk for a penny. Nope. Leave the property. And that's where the penny auctions had come from too, which I'll speak about in a moment. But they told the government buyers, no, we're not going to sell you for 1 penny. Just leave. You get 0. And then they started to pour the milk on the road and the trucks transporting the products to cities like Detroit, Michigan, and Toledo, Ohio. I know Toledo, and it's still kind of remote out there and a lot of farming. I wouldn't say remote, but a huge amount of farms around there. It's farming country. So they had, shortages in the stores because the farmers in the local area wouldn't sell to the buyers that wanted to give 1 penny. And see, I'd heard about these things called penny auctions. And see, this is exactly where it came from. That's interesting. I'd read the backstory to it, so when I saw this, it makes total sense. In the 1930s, just like these farmers were saying, they were unable to pay their mortgages or pay their taxes for the real estate tax. Even in a depression, they don't allow that tax to go to 0 where you don't have to pay it. You still have to pay it. So they don't care if you're in a depression. They'll take all your homes. Bigger the depression, the more homes there are to take. Just like BlackRock was going to swoop up $50 billion in real estate during this collapse here. They already had the money in cash ready to go and buy everything cash. So when you lost your house, they're probably going to put it on the market for like $100, and then BlackRock will buy it up and then rent it back to you for $3,000 a month while you're in bankruptcy proceedings. So the thing was, at that time, that happened a lot. An enormous amount of people lost their farms because the farmers couldn't sell their produce into the market because nobody had any money. The stories were going that the amount of money just dried up. There was no money. They didn't have credit cards, and there was nothing digital then. It was money. So it all just went out of circulation because everybody was keeping it. So there was literally no money except what the government freshly minted and put into circulation. And the minute it was out on the street, boom, it's gone. It disappeared faster than toilet paper disappeared off a pallet in Costco during the COVID rage of buying the toilet paper. Faster than that. So these farmers would lose their farms, and then the bank would come in to auction it off. And they would do like a live Saturday morning auction where you'd actually stand on the block and, hey, starting price on this, but they're actually standing on a block on the farmer's land of all things. How disgusting is that? They didn't do it in like the courthouse where you could bid. They actually stood on like the farmer's front porch to bid off their house. So when they did that, if anybody like me or an out-of-stater or anybody who they didn't know, like I wouldn't have known them, if I went and said, I want to participate in the auction, the very first thing when they first started, who wants to bid off? If any one person said, I'll bid, they'd beat them up right there and throw them out and like leave them near half dead for trying to even bid on it. Now, back then, they didn't escort police with them at that time for these penny auctions. But the auctioneers knew quickly within like the first week or so, anybody who bid in on that actually got so beaten up that you and I would understand it as they would be sent to the emergency room, and that's how badly they got beat up when they would come in and try to auction on these. So then the farmer himself would buy back the house, sometimes even less than they paid for the house because it was on the auction and nobody else would bid. So you go, I'll bid $1. And there was no other bidders, so then they got their house back for $1. Stuff. There's cool stories like this moving around. People took care of themselves. But in today's age, they're going to do it online. They're going to do it on the blockchain. And if they did it live, they'd probably have 8 or 10 cops there. And it would only be corporate buyers. Because I have never seen a live home auction here in my life ever once. Perhaps there are things like that, but I've never seen it. Where they actually go to the house and they'll auction it off, and you'll be standing there with 6, 8, 10 other people going, I'll buy it, I'll give you more money, I'll give you more money. So the penny auctions, and then it got to the point there, 1933. So you can see that's been a whole year already. When they stopped issuing certain types of stocks and the dividends off that, that was still 1932. And then we're rolling in here to 1933. And there's this little device right here, 4-in-1 aircon. Electric companies don't want you to know about this. Put your ice and your water right in here. Turn on the fan and cool down. I use this when I go camping. If we have electric at the campsites, heat pump broke one time. We were waiting for 3 days, 90 degrees here in East Tennessee. Use this in our room and it actually did cool us down where we could get comfortably to sleep. Turn it on. That hum means cool air coming your way. Learn more by going to easysummercool.com. That link's in the description box below. And now on with the rest of the video. So if you're thinking about how long this whole collapse may take, let's roll into December of 1933. Still another year and a half of this to go if anybody's out there keeping notes. It's actually going to go through October of 2024. But after that event, the celestial event of the second magnetic field forming the outer solar system along with the sun, Earth captured in the block wall in those two toroid looping magnetic fields, that happens October 23rd, 24th of 2024. But then you got all this in the book happening too. You got all this happening with what we're going to see, Europe going with no energy this year and the stock market's down, non-deliveries on the grain markets for futures in Chicago. You know, you're seeing all this happen in real time. But as that happens, even as we move through into spring of next year, you're going to have another whole year plus of that. And then it looks like it finally gets a little better here. Roosevelt would come in by then. So then they had the New Deal and I got all these things, the TVA projects. And again, they put a new face on it. But the economy is in shatters at the moment. Regardless of what it is, you got to put the blame on, quote unquote, the leader. The blame's got to go somewhere, right? So we're just talking numerical fact here. It just happens that it lands on that side of the fence as to what is happening and the percentages and numbers. But then there's a face behind it. So that's as deep as it goes on the politics. But here, this is November 24th, 1933. General opinion seems that President Roosevelt is facing a crisis on the monetary question, or will soon have to either, to the left, use the money printing press, or to the right, stabilize and return to the gold standard. So obviously the money collapsed at that point, where they had to make a transition in the economy the way things were done. So see, they're moving to the printing press. Modern monetary theory, the same equivalent today would be moving over to blockchain and digital technologies and cryptocurrencies versus returning to a gold standard. Because the gold standard is always going to be there. It's been sound money for what, 8,000 years plus, or I mean, as long as even further back. You go back in archaeological finds of the Denisovans even back 80,000 years ago, and they still got gold in there as like, you know, making it into something wearable. So it's not just modern time when we think about gold as value. It's been like that for 80, 100,000, or even since Homo sapiens sapiens have been on the face of the planet. Valuable. So I don't think that would ever change. So there's always going to be the choice A or B. The choice B is always the sound money. It's always going to go to a gold standard. But in the 1930s, if they turn to the printing press, then the next step for us, if you're looking around there to see where money might transition, is going to be central bank digital currencies. And BRICS is already going that way with their new gold-backed currency backed by commodities. This period of printing press is ending now. It will never continue ever again. They're going to have to reset it. It might come back in 60 years or 50 years, but for right now, as we know it, it's gone, it's done, it's not coming back. So the printing press is going to stop. It needs to be replaced with something. How quickly that replacement's going to come and what kind of pressure they're going to put on society to accept the new thing is a very different question. Central bank digital currencies are gold standard. And see, that's what he was wrestling with because they put a new face on it because it got so bad. So Biden is going to get so bad that they got to turn it over and somebody else will jump in. And that'll be the new face, just like Roosevelt was. So whoever replaces now because of such tremendous economic conditions, it's a play-by-play. I mean, I'm reading a playbook here. So they're going to do the same thing. They're going to replace. They're going to have to. And that new person is going to come with these same two choices. Oh, we got to go to central bank digital currencies or go to a gold standard. They're going to run the same MO with the new face on it. Give it a minute or two. In 8 months, the experiment, the tangible improvement is slight. Business on the downgrade, distrust growing, and huge public debt arousing fear as to the government's credit itself. It is a very difficult time for everybody. That's interesting. They gave you a very clean time frame on this. So when the collapse comes, they're going to try to move over to central bank digital currencies and gold standard. They're going to battle back and forth, but it looks like 8 months will happen. Relate time to that. Now, 8 months in 1933 is how much time now? Or is it still 8 months? I mean, things move much faster now, and especially with digital currencies versus printing press, there's a huge difference. Central bank digital currencies, Stellar, Litecoin, literally 3 seconds later you have the money. Okay, I transferred it versus the printing press. Print it, put it in an envelope, mail it to me. Print it, send it with a courier down the street to me. I just sent you whatever in Litecoin in 3 seconds, and they're still not even got the press set up yet to print the thing. So is it 8 months, 8 months? Should be the question. That's so eerie that all you have to do is change the number of months, there's A or B choice, and a new face on it, and you have the exact same play here. Page 141, if anybody's following along in the Great Depression, A Diary book, page 141 explains that one. Now here, again, come back to editor's note. This guy's pretty smart when he writes. Despite the flurry of legislation and dramatic overhaul of the New Deal's early efforts, meaning trying to bring in this whole money printing thing versus gold-backed currency, the American Federation of Labor estimated that in April 1933 that there were 13 million Americans unemployed, up from 12 million in November in 1932. To remedy this, November 1933, Roosevelt's advisor, Harry Hopkins, hastily assembled a plan and a $400 million budget to create the Civil Works Administration, which is, the TVA, which is Tennessee Valley Authority, branched off of that as well, to create dams and locks and things to create electricity, flood all the farmers out, and higher up the hill where they still own farms, make them sell their whole farms. So higher on the hill, you could buy that and turn it into prime real estate, turn it into neighborhoods, and then steal the land from the farmer, which is exactly what they did in Tennessee. So the Civil Works Administration to provide federal jobs for the unemployed Americans, to build roads, parks, national parks. That's a huge amount of our national parks came from this program, by the way. Playgrounds, airports, the roads. What we know as interstate highways today was built then. Because Roosevelt also envisioned with Eisenhower that the American road system needed to be 2 lanes each direction. Because in a national emergency, they could turn all 4 lanes going in one direction. So think about the entire army of World War II that won that, moving through America down the highways in all in one direction. Like you could move the entire army in less than 3 days. But that was not true at Roosevelt's time. It was all still 1 and 2 lane roads, which were being expanded. But to go 30 miles would be 2 hours on some of those roads. And that was the normal rate of travel, way slower than today. Think about the rate of travel in 1933 on a really windy road. 1 lane. You've been on some 1-lane highways before. You know how excruciatingly slow you can go, especially if there's somebody slower in front of you. So things were even slower back then. Now we have 8-lane highways instead of 4-lane highways. So again, that whole metric of speed, 8 months on the monetary front in 1933 or 2 weeks to travel somewhere in 1933 is now sped up to like 2 hours, or 2 days. There's a jump in fastness and quickness. So the Civil Works Administration provided federal jobs for the unemployed Americans. You could see that again, like when it goes into huge unemployment, they're going to come back and have some of these same programs. They're just going to rename them, but they'll be exactly the same program. So the Civil Works Administration, what needs to be fixed in America? I mean, if you were going to have a whole core of 10 million people to work in a single program, what would you focus it on? Well, back then they built a bunch of dams, and they built the highway system in America. Well, we know at least the backbone of it back in the 30s. It really got expanded in the 1950s, but that time. And they built the roads and all the dams and all the things went hydroelectric after that, TVA, Dam Works projects to create more factories, to create more employment. But the playgrounds and the airports, I can't speak to that expanding. But Roth would begin to see the effects in his community almost immediately. By Christmas, some 3.5 million Americans out of those 13 million. So if you want to do a percentage there, you're looking at 3.5 by 13 were employed by the CWA, the Civil Works Administration. So all the people went out of work. The government said we need to fix something. A whole bunch of money from the new issued currency got put into that program, and then they hired all those people, and they were paid in that to take home to their families to spend, which meant every supermarket had to start to get it, or every store had to start to accept it. So is that like a 40% changeover then, that they could get the monetary system to grab hold again like Velcro and stick? So 40% of the nation, of everybody, has to start using the currency before it gets into that founding, that trusting, the awakening founding again of a new currency after a collapse. I mean, what percent of a currency has to start working before people believe it's real and it works? Apparently here they must have crunched the numbers, and at, let's say, 40%, they have established a new currency that people actually believe that has value because they pegged it to some gold at the time and say that was the bait and switch there. And then if you skip up another week and a half or so November 24th was that one all about, they just hired all these people and things. But then December 12th, which is just a few weeks later, talk of inflation died down since opposition to the president's gold policy became vocal. Very little activity in the gold market. The dollar is still quoted at 60 cents, and the stock market stationary. The government bond issue of $5 million was oversubscribed. Money meant to meet the December 15th interest and refunding requirements. Increased confidence. And then here I do not think this improvement is due to the manipulations of the New Deal. Oh, they were already faking it back then, even on the numbers, just like today. The local relief problem had been solved by putting about 10,000 men to work on a government project at government expense. And they were getting, get this. Okay, so they had them out there digging ditches. Again, this is all like roadwork stuff without using the dozers or back then steam shovels. So you got $15 a week. You got to dig ditches, clear trees from parks, like making national parks, widening streets. And even back then they said none of this work is very essential. So you see how that was. Very little activity in the gold market. So somebody had suppressed the ability for you to start working and moving in gold. So they stopped that. So they introduced the new currency, got all those people to work, started paying them in the new money. It was still the U.S. dollar, but it was differently structured to give them faith that it still had the value and it wouldn't erode any more value. But then they restricted the ability to get gold so you could only go to the new money. See, if you bring it to now, would they restrict you coming off what we know is like online banking, traditional bank, credit cards, these sort of things, using the U.S. dollar to make you switch over into the central bank digital currency, U.S. dollar? Hugely different. They're two different things. They might appear to have the same name, but they are vastly Grand Canyon-wide different. And that's the same thing they did there. It was exactly the same. They issued the new issuance from the U.S. dollar, and they took everybody's ability to transact in gold, which everybody done up to that point. So think about that. Up to this point, we've only ever transacted with like credit cards, debit cards, cash, coins. We've never interacted with the central bank digital currency before, as a government issuing it and then people using it to buy stuff with a digital phone or something. So they're going to limit your ability to transact in one thing. But we still have gold, but now we have the online system where we're going to transit to central bank digital currency. So this time they're going to have to stop two of the mediums of exchange for it to get totally over to the new central bank digital currency, otherwise known as CBDC. Oh, that's crazy because, in 1930, they were only fighting with the printing press of the printing of the U.S. dollar and the faith that we got the money and the faith. See, everybody's back to work. We're putting all these new projects, all the national parks, people can go in. There's all these new jobs. There's vacation spots. There's this and that. They only had to take away the gold option because it never mentioned silver. The gold was back in the money of the country. December 13th, 1934 will be another depression year like 1933. That's not cool, especially going for 2 years like that and then knowing where Europe's going right now into this winter is going to be difficult at best for them with 15% reduction in everything across what you know is heating and lighting. Like those cities are going to start to go dark too, and it's going to be very dangerous, very dark, very scary place in the evening there, especially when the lights go out. And all the crime and everything happening and people will be stealing and try to make ends meet and live and things. It's going to get weird. All right, so then Happy New Year, December 28th, 1933. They're happy that Christmas had finished, and they're pulling off into the new year. And it's interesting, there's a couple bullet points of history here, too, that match up. So this is on December 28th, 1933. The Secretary of Treasury issues a new order calling in all gold in private hands. Happy New Year. It'll be paid for the old price of $20.34 instead of the world market price at $36. So see, there was already a market outside the United States for the gold. And they didn't want people running there because the price of the equivalent only got you 20 of the dollars here. But if I stepped over into Canada, I could sell it for $36. So how many people would take advantage of that? Well, if you're living close to the border, okay. But how far away do you need to live from the border to make that worth your time? Like how many ounces of gold would you have to go up there? But, 20 to 36, you're getting an extra $16 of the money at that time to go there and exchange at that rate. If you had 100 ounces of gold or 1,000 ounces of gold, you can make an extra $16,000 at that time. People were getting paid $15 a day. And all you had to do was go to the next country with 100 ounces of gold or 1,000 ounces of gold, and you make like a lifetime's wage. The arbitrage on that would be sick.